Hey crew, it's Pitt, and I'm back with a little bit more discernment. Today we're going to be diving back into the Archaix Chronicon. We will be reading aloud and discussing as we go along the various points that are brought to light by the text. It is not the format for everyone, but people do find value in it, so you are more than welcome to tag along as we continue our exploration. Before we begin, however, if you are unfamiliar with me, any of my unconventional beliefs, or if at any point in time I lose you in terminology, there will be several playlists linked in the corner above, in the box down below, along with the original source material, so that you can get a better understanding of who I am and why I say the things that I do. If you find value, I ask that you do all of the wonderful things down below. Give me a like, a share, a follow. Throw me a comment. Whether you agree or disagree with anything that is stated, put it in the box down below, and if it remains respectful, it gets to remain up. If you truly find value, consider hitting the super thanks, joining for a membership, or picking up a copy of any of my books. The first one, A Series of Unconventional Beliefs, details the procedure by which I learned to heal myself through the grace of God using the electromagnetic forces of creation, or the Holy Spirit. The second one is The Green Stone. It is a further explanation. It is dealing with spiritual alchemy, and I consider it to be the completion of two of Carl Jung's works, the Mysterium Conjunctionis and his works with the archetypes, since I have completely changed the MBTI system. The third one is The House Built Upon Shifting Sands, and will be the most relevant to today because it is where we go through and we deconstruct the Bible using the Bible and proving that there is really no reason to believe anything that is written in Genesis, no matter what you think the source may be. All of these books are available for purchase, and the links are provided down below of me reading the books out loud in full so that you can get a better understanding of who I am and why I say the things that I do. With that being said, we are going to dive back in and continue our exploration of the Archaix Chronicon. We are up to 2791 BC, which is about the beginning of actual artwork being found. Now, that is with the full caveat that there is artwork that extends significantly past this point in time, right? The caves in France, I can't remember the exact name of them, but there is significant reason to believe that around 12,000 years or so ago, maybe even as much as 35 or so, there were people painting inside of here significant things from the sky with a surprising degree of accuracy as to the location in the sky of the things inside of this cave that was a little bit hard to get to. We also have evidence of writing from around the same time period, right? 12,600 years or so ago, roughly. And we do have evidence existent of writing at that period in time. And so first artwork is definitely subjective, right? But there is artwork to be found at this point in time. This was also the time of the second Egyptian wars, right? The second major clash of dynasties. That was this point in time as well. All right, 2791 BC, 1104 Annus Mundi, 4896 before Armageddon, 552 before the flood. 2448 Anunnaki chronology, 1518 Phoenix chronology, 1248 orbital chronology, 880 Jewish chronology, 648 in the descent of the Watchers. 312 in the Vedic calendar, 48 in the Anunnaki dynasty, and 24 Anno Pyramid. Planet Phoenix passed through the inner system, completing a 138-year orbit on its way back out to the Kuiper Belt. Though we have no records of Phoenix being sighted, the calendrics indicate that Phoenix was indeed seen. And perhaps there may have been a transit darkening the sun. Well, that's a wild assumption. We don't have any record of it happening. We don't have any record of anyone seeing it, no artwork depicting it, no nothing, right? But the calendar says, according to calculations that I made up, right, I have not, as of yet, seen any evidence of this thing happening. Right? Well, that was the whole point of doing the Chronicon, right? I was assuming that there would be evidence inside of here that it actually happened, and I have not seen that happen at all. We have not seen any evidence of that. We've seen a lot of speculation, right? We can speculate about a lot of things. I speculate quite often. I speculate about Atlantis, right? I believe that there was a society on a continent in the current Atlantic Ocean, that it extended from just off the coast of Africa all the way up almost to Greenland in the Arctic Circle. That it was a not a island, but a small continent, right? Like not as large as the one that was expressed as being on the other side of it, but definitely not an island complex. That comes from the writings of Plato. I read through them. We did it aloud. We speculated. Now, my speculation is that this civilization out in the Atlantic was one of the sources, right, for the varieties of people that we have. I believe that there was another source. It was in the Pacific Ocean. It encompassed from the Philippines all the way over to almost to the South American continent. There is significant reason to believe that as well, and some people believe that that was Atlantis, and that is perfectly an understandable thing, right? Now, Atlantis was specifically talking about in the Atlantic Ocean. That was very specific in the description of it, but that doesn't mean that there was not another island, right? Another continent out there. And as a matter of fact, recent studies have proven that there indeed was another continent, that it was probably submerged at some point in time, and that absolutely explains the whole Easter Island deal. I believe that when there was some sudden catastrophic event, whether that was a meteor comes down or a mud flood comes down, or if it's the pole shift making the planet change, there was a cataclysmic event. And the cataclysmic event caused both of these civilizations to go underwater. That there was a subsistence of some type, whether that was due to the isostasis from the planetary change, right? If it moved and the waters moved and it made the plates change, that's one theory. If there was some extra planetary incursion, a meteorite, a mud flood, gravel rain, anything along that side that would change the actual weight distribution across the plates, could cause a rapid subsidence, right? This area goes down, changes topography. Everything's got to adjust if a piece of the plate goes underwater or under the mantle, right? We do know that these things happen, that they, right? There are three kinds of rocks, right? There is igneous. Igneous is the word. There's metamorphic and there's sandstone is it's not sandstone. What is sedimentary? That's the word, right? Igneous is formed by raw chemicals deep inside of the earth, forming into heterogeneous sections, right? This particular section is calcium carbonate. This particular section is aluminum oxide, right? These are real things, and we can measure through rocks whether or not it was an igneous formation or a metamorphic. Igneous is formed deep inside of the earth, right? Inside of the magma, at minimum, maybe even as far as the outer core, and that it explodes, right, due to pressure and a variety of other things. And it explodes, and you either have what is called extrusions or entrainment, right? Extrusions are the rock itself explodes out and it forms mountains, and inclusions are that there is these things inside of some greater thing. But igneous is formed deep inside of the core of the earth. Sedimentary is the gradual wearing away of other rocks into another layer that then gets compressed through time and pressure and a variety of things into a new rock, right? Sandstone is a sedimentary rock created from sand, and that sand came from igneous rocks. But if there is a period where there is some subsistence and it pushes some of that underneath, that sandstone can transform. It can metamorphose into a new type of rock. It is no longer just sedimentary. You can't really take it apart, but you can still see the layers. That is the metamorphic rock, and that is the only real three types of rock that we have on the planet. Every type of rock is a variation of one of those, right? Granite is igneous. Sandstone is sedimentary. That word is so hard for me today. And then we have like shale. Shale is a sedimentary rock that has been metamorphosed. And so these are the three types of rock. They all have crystalline structures. That might be important to somebody out there. But this is the only three types of rock that we have. And we can make assumptions based upon things. But we do know that this happens. We do know that sometimes large sections of the earth are subsumed. They go underneath other parts and they become metamorphosed. That's how that happens. It is my contention that at some point that is what happened, that there was some reason for subsistence around the Atlantic continent and it subsided. And that subsistence put it underneath the water. How far underwater? Definitely up for debate. There are remnants of it. However, there are islands that poke up. The Azores is one such remnant. The Canary Islands, another such remnant. There are quite a few of them scattered. And so my particular theory, right? This is a rant, but my particular theory is that there was on this island 10 different peoples. That is coming again from Plato. There were 10 kings that ruled this place. They were different than the European continent and the African continent. They lived there, right? They were there in these individual kingdoms. We have a small measure of their daily life written down. Now, how accurate that is, definitely up for debate. But if there was this out there, that would explain quite a few things. That would explain the Tuatha De Danann, the Celtic peoples, right? The Gaelics. Let's hit it with Gaelic. The Gaelic people. That would explain the Cherokee people, right? Cherokee specifically because they are a separate indigenous subtype. They don't fit the genetic correlations of the Choctaw or the genetic correlations of the Iroquois. These are different, right? The Choctaw and the Iroquois are much closer related than the Cherokee is to any of them. It is entirely possible that the Egyptian culture, that the Irish culture, that the Mesoamerican culture on the Atlantic side, and the North American culture around the Cherokees all came from the same source. And if that is so, then it would be understandable that there would be derivatives in language coming from that same source. I believe that this was the exact same thing that happened in the Pacific, that the Easter Island culture, whoever they happened to be, were the ones that were the Tolmec, or not the Tolmec, maybe it was the Tolmec, in Peru, the ones that built Machu Picchu. I mean, doesn't make any sense where it's at. There's harbors attached. There may have been some fuckery going around with the continental plates around that time. And so I do believe that there was another culture, right, on the other side in the Pacific as opposed to the Atlantic. And both of them went down at the same time, and that they peopled Peru, right, Peru. And then they also peopled India and China and Australia, right? That particular culture was responsible for the eastern side, and the other culture from Atlantis was responsible for the western side, and there was a great deal of differentiation between them, but there may have been a common language. We do see evidence of that, right? We do see similarities in languages between some of the Europeans and some of the Middle Eastern peoples, even so far as into North and South America. That would make sense if they had a common source, right? Now, again, this is still speculative. But what we do see is that there is a differentiation between language systems spontaneously erupting across the planet, right? We do see some of it as derivative, right? The European languages, the Middle Eastern languages, and the South American East Side understandings. I don't know if we would go as far as languages, really do correlate together in some really amazing ways, right? Like almost as if they had the same root source words. Now, whether that is the Anunnaki who lived on Atlantis is entirely up for debate, or whether it was a race of long-lived humans. That is, again, entirely up for debate, and either one of those are equally plausible because we don't have evidence for or against either one. If we had more evidence, we could make more definitive statements in that particular way. But it is entirely likely that there was a common source for multiple peoples. That is probably where the myth of the Tower of Babel came from. It is not explained in the Bible or in Jasher in any way that resembles reality. But that doesn't mean that there was not something at some point. And it may even be that the building of this tower was the thing that caused the subsidence, right? If what straw breaks the camel's back? If you are sourcing building materials from over there and you bring it over here, that changes the weight distribution on the planet, right? Not in a way that is going to affect the orbit of the planet, but if you stack enough of that weight in a particular place and it's not as firm as you thought it might be, it might break some things. And we do have a little bit of correlation that we can talk about with that. We do this thing called fracking these days. And what we do when we frack is we inject liquid into the bones of the earth and we crack them, right? That's what we do. We over pressurize to the point where we break apart the very structure upon which we are resting. That process releases gas and we capture the gas and we sell it for profit. Now, the outflow of that is that we have increased seismic activity in every single location where there is a fracking well. That is something that you can track. It is traceable. It is something that they don't really tell you about. So you got to dig for it. Dutch Sense, back before he really lost his mind too much, used to have a fairly good track on that, right? He would pull out. We had an earthquake occurred right here, right now, right? And he would go and look, and the earthquake, while it is not in a seismic zone, would be centered around a fracking operation. That's because we are breaking the bones of the planet. We are literally fracturing the shale in order to extract the gaseous materials that are part of that structure. Well, if we do that enough, there may be a point where there will be a collapse. I wonder, we have this place here in Louisiana, down in Iberia Parish, and the Tabasco plant. You may have heard of Tabasco. They make a hot sauce, right? They are located right there on top of it. And it used to be a salt dome. And what happened was we were out there mining the salt, and we got to a point where they were not anticipating this, but they overextended. And there was a fracture in the structure of the dome. It would no longer support the weight of the water above it, and it formed a sinkhole. And these are things that are real, that we can look at as examples of possibilities into the future. If there was a construction effort going on as described in Jasher, as ridiculous as that particular narrative is, if there was the Tower of Babel being constructed and it was of such a massive intensity, right? And they were pulling in materials from over there, changing the weight distribution over here, it is entirely possible and even likely that they broke something. Right? Now, I do not in any way believe that Jasher is an accurate representation of anything. It's just an example. There is no way that that particular narrative is true. But it's to point out, right? Maybe they were building a tower. Maybe they were building a different pyramid. Right? That is a lot of weight. And if the substructure is not able to contain the weight, there would be a fracture. If you're close to the waters, it is entirely possible to cause a subsidence that would make it go down. That is not that the island is floating, right? It is that the structure couldn't bear the weight. Well, we do have support for that, especially out in the Atlantic, where it's a little bit thin to begin with. All of that to point out that there are a lot of theories, right? There are a lot of theories about the origination of people. There's a lot of theories about Atlantis and whatever is out. Like, I don't even know what I do know what the name is, and I can't pull it to mind. It's not crap. I can't remember what the name of it is out in the Pacific. Y'all let me know if you remember what it is, but it's the other one, right? There's Atlantis and there's another one. And both of them are equally valid in speculation. I mean, we don't have this or that for either one of them, but we absolutely do know that there were civilizations. By civilizations, I'm not talking about the entirety of it, but large portions of it that went underwater at some point. We have evidence of that in the Indian Ocean. We have evidence of that off the coast of Cappadocia, right? We have some understanding that these things can happen. We don't have to make wild assumptions that this one people in this one remote area of the planet managed to go to the entirety of the planet and spread theirs, right? When there is the possibility that a civilization went underwater and there were remnants of a variety of peoples who went to different areas around the same time, right? Like exactly the same time, and they would have taken that knowledge with them. The entire evidence of learning that knowledge would disappear, but the knowledge that you had would be retained as long as you were able to retain it, right? If nobody survived that was able to do stonework, then stonework would be hard. You would know it was possible. You wouldn't really know how to do it. But if somebody survived that was able to do stonework, it would seem miraculous that all of a sudden they were doing these wild stone things that are definitely out of chronology, right? It doesn't make sense that this appeared fully fleshed at this period of time. My theory is leaning towards that, right? It is possible that somebody on an island way up in the northern part of the planet, it is a circle, by the way, a sphere. It is a sphere, got all the way around to India and was able to begin a civilization over there by trading for their daughters. That's wild, right? That is less believable. It is more believable that there was a disaster which scattered a bunch of people in different directions than it is that this single origination point with no cataclysm to spur it led to the colonization of the entire planet within a very short amount of time. Barring the cataclysm being a driver, there's really not even a reason to do so. We've always had explorers, yes. Were there explorers on the North American continent before Christopher Columbus? And I'm not talking about indigenous peoples. Yes, a multitude of them. We have a reason to believe all the way into the Midwest that the Vikings came, right? There's evidence that these things happen. And to deny that is stupid. Yes, these things did happen. But A and B don't necessarily equal C, right? Sometimes it does if you have the correct inputs, but sometimes it equals D. Right? Sometimes you don't know that there is another factor involved in it. Sometimes our speculation has good ground and sometimes it doesn't. It is much easier to assume the less complicated understanding than it is to get involved in these one people went and somehow they just miraculously changed this one word, right? It's the same word, but if you flip it backwards, it works. And if it's the right way, it doesn't. But this other word in the exact same language, you don't flip that one around, right? You don't do that. It's just this one word that conveniently fits. Well, correlation and causation are not the same. Back to the text. Right? And then we have no records of Phoenix being sighted. The calendrics indicate that it was seen. Well, if we don't have any records that was sighted, then this is entirely speculative. This year completes the second 552-year Phoenix cycle since man's banishment in 3895 BC, being precisely 552 years before the deluge. Interestingly, this flood year was 66.6 ways, 6%, the way through the Phoenix timeline, starting with man's banishment to the flood in 2239, and likewise, 66.6% of the Anunnaki chronology remains until they are destroyed in 2106 AD, the 6,000th year of man's banishment. But completed the second Phoenix cycle, right? But this was only 66% of the way through the cycle. So this is the entire timeline, right? 66.6% through numbers that you are just randomly assuming are true. This year is 2448 of the Anunnaki chronology, 2448 being the number for disaster. See 1446 BC. And 2791 BC is also 4,896 years before Armageddon, or 2,448 plus 2,448 years. This Phoenix passing was exactly 360 years after Enoch had been made emperor in 3151 BC. That came from Jasher because there is no other source for that. Noah was 48 years old. There is no reason to take Genesis as a literal book, right? It is not meant to be a history. I mean, it is like it is meant to be a history. That's the wrong way to say that. It is not an accurate history, right? It contains some degree of accurate things, but not a whole lot of them. Not a whole lot of them at all. It contains verifiably untrue things. And so there is really no reason to believe that Genesis or Exodus were real, right? There is no written records of these things really before the exile period, right? There is no written records anywheres of Moses outside of the biblical understanding. There's Abram. There is plenty of Abram, but Abram was a fairly common name in this area. There is reference to a house of David, kind of, right? It talks about this one particular house of David, but it does not say that it was a rulership, simply that it was a house. Well, there's a house of Pittman. It's right here. Right? That doesn't mean that it was a rulership. There are a lot of things to speculate about. There is no reason to believe that Genesis is real, right? If that is confusing to you, I do explain that in much, much greater detail. I have a whole book on that. I have me reading through the Bible discussing that. There are other parts and places where we talk about it. There is no reason to believe that Genesis is real. Original sin falls flat on its face. The expulsion from the garden, completely dumb, right? The flood story as it is given didn't happen. There was no global flood. There was a lot of regional floods, no global flood. And so there are a lot of things that just don't work in that particular narrative. And as bad as that narrative is, and it is bad, it's really bad. Jasher is worse. Like Jasher is fiction, just completely made up apologetics from the beginning to the end. And so if you're basing your understanding on Jasher, you are doing it wrong, right? There are many right ways to do things. There's not one right way, but there are a lot of wrong ways too. 2778 BC, 1117 Annus Mundi. This is the start date for the Egyptian short chronology. Remarkably, only 37 years from the completion of the Great Pyramid. Footnote: civilization or barbarism, 281. 2755 BC, 1148 M, 4860 before Armageddon, 516 before the flood, 2484 Anunnaki chronology, 1554 Phoenix chronology, 1284 orbital chronology, 916 in the Jewish calendar, 684 descent of the Watchers, 84 in the Anunnaki dynasty, and 60 of the Anno pyramid. Enosh died, the son of Seth, at the age of 905. And again, this is a Jasher reference. Once a mighty king, when he ruled over the Sethites in 3439 BC, the Anunnaki descended to Earth. Woo! That doesn't even comport with Jasher. Incidentally, this year of his death was 2484 Anunnaki chronology, or 6 cursed Earth periods of 414 years each, equaling 18 orbits of Phoenix. 2750 BC, 1145 Annus Mundi. Approximate date for the completion of the Great Pyramid according to modern Egyptologists. They are completely wrong. The date is 65 years off, and it is significantly more than that. But you have to believe that, people were around for 12,000 years to believe that it could have been over 12,000 years ago. Footnote 1, The Secret in the Bible, 170. 2729 BC, 1166 Annus Mundi, 4834 before Armageddon, 490 before the flood, 2510 Anunnaki chronology, 1580 Phoenix chronology, 1310 orbital chronology, 384 in the Mayan calendar, 110 Anunnaki dynasty, and 86 Anno pyramid. The second king of the Anunnaki Nephilim dynasty takes the throne, named Emin-Luana. His seat situated at the city of metalworkers called Bad Tibira. His Sumerian title, I'm going to do this. We're going to pop that out real quick. Bad Tibira, also Padbira, is Sumerian, was an ancient Sumerian city dating back to the early dynastic period, which appears among antediluvian cities in the Sumerian king list. Let's see if we can get a map on it. I want to see where this is located. All right, where are we? Nasira, Almada. All right, so we are very much, there's Baghdad, right? And Babylon was right here, so we're not that far. Definitely inside of the Fertile Crescent. All right. His Sumerian title, Menluanana, signifies that he was a priest and son of heaven. His own reign would last 43,000 shars, evenings and mornings, or 120 years. Noah was 110 years old. His future wife, Naamah, being 192 years old. This year is 70 times 7 to the Great Flood. 2713 BC, 1182 Annus Mundi, 4818 before Armageddon, 474 before the Flood, 2526 Anunnaki Chronology, 1596 Phoenix Chronology, 1326 Orbital Chronology, 660 Olmec Calendar, 400 in the Mayan Calendar, and 102 Anno Pyramid. The first Baktun of 144,000 days of the Mayan long count calendar, complete from 3113 BC, factored on the ancient year known to the Maya, the 360-day year. A tune was a year, a Baktun was a collection of years. The Mayan system is also based off of multiples of 52. Interestingly enough, there are 52 weeks. And interestingly, this year is 520 years from 3233 BC. Enoch began prophesying against the Anunnaki. Again, Jasher. This is all, I'm assuming. I haven't even gotten to that yet in Jasher. I don't think. Actually, well, never mind. This is the 408th year of the Maya Temple of the Cross calendar that started in 3121 BC. 408 years being 2,448 plus 2,448 months. Noah is 126 years old and Naamah is 208 years old. Where did you get the name from? Right, the Bible just refers to Noah's wife. I mean, I can be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure that it just says Noah's wife, and so it didn't come from Genesis. I think it came from Jasher, right? This is, again, a reference to Jasher as far as I am aware, and again, no reason to believe Jasher is correct in any way. 2707 BC, 1188 Annus Mundi, 4812 before Armageddon, 468 before the Flood. 2532 Anunnaki Chronology, 1602 Phoenix Chronology, 1332 Orbital Chronology. 732 in the Descent of the Watchers, 666 in the Olmec Calendar, 396 in the Vedic Calendar, 132 Anunnaki Dynasty, 108 Anno Pyramid. The Anunnaki planet Nibiru ascends out of the deep, south of the solar system. The deep is the entirety of space. It is not just southern polar regions. After 732 years below the ecliptic, it passes through the inner system in the 22nd year of King Emeluana of Sumer. The calendrics for this year are astonishing. This is 108 years after the Great Pyramid was completed, and 1188 Annus Mundi, or 108 times 11. From man's banishment in 3895 BC. It is 468 years before the deluge, or 5,616 months, which is 108 times 52 months. As this is the 1332nd year that Earth had orbited the sun in its new astronomical position, this timeline is 666 plus 666 years in orbit. And this year is also the 666th of the Olmec calendar. The Vedic calendar has it as the 396th year, half of Nibiru's orbit of 792 years. The Anunnaki dynasty over the Sethites, beginning the oppression, was 132 years earlier, or 792 plus 792 months, in 2839 BC at the birth of Noah. This year of 2707 BC was precisely a cursed earth period of 414 years after the start of the Mayan temple of the cross calendar in 3121 BC. Nibiru begins its 60-year journey north of the ecliptic. 2699 BC, 1196 Annus Mundi, 4800 before Armageddon, 460 before the flood, 2544 Anunnaki chronology, 1614 Phoenix chronology, 1340 orbital chronology, 972 in the Jewish calendar, 740 in the descent of the Watchers, 414 in the Mayan calendar, 140 in the Anunnaki dynasty, 116 Anno Pyramid. This is the traditional beginning of the Chinese civilization. Ancient Chinese calendar begins. It must be recalled that the Chinese recall that their own first dynasty began with the Dragon Kings, Anunnaki. That is an interpretation. That is possible, right? I am not discounting that it is a possibility, but if that is true, that plays into my understanding, right? What I described at the beginning. This year is 600 times 8 years before the Anunnaki are defeated at Armageddon in 2106. And as I must say, we are not at 2106. As this is 460 years before the flood, it is exactly 5,520 months. Historians have for a long time recognized the links between the ancient Maya and the Chinese. We find it here interesting that this calendrical start of China is the 414th year of the Mayan calendar, or a cursed earth period. The Maya were significantly later than the Chinese. Significantly. 2660 BC, 1235 AM, 4765 before Armageddon, 421 before the flood, 2579 Anunnaki chronology, 1649 Phoenix chronology, 1379 orbital chronology, 713 Olmec calendar, 155 Anno Pyramid. Canaan died at the age of 910, once a mighty Sethite king. Noah was 179 years old. His future wife, Naamah, was 261. All speculative. And there is the only reference that I am aware of for any of this is Jasher. 2653 BC, 1242 Annus Mundi, 4758 before Armageddon, 414 before the flood, 2586 Anunnaki chronology, 1656 Phoenix chronology, 1386 orbital chronology, 720 in the Olmec calendar, 460 Mayan calendar, 186 in the Anunnaki dynasty, and 162 Anno Pyramid. Planet Phoenix enters the inner system, completing its 138-year orbit, and exits on its way back out to the Kuiper Belt. This is one cursed Earth period before the flood, 414 years, and this year uniquely synchronizes with the Mayan calendar. It is 460 years of the Mayan long count, or 5,520 months, 552 times 10. The other ancient American system, the Olmec, has it at 720 years, or 10 precessional years, 72 years a degree in the cycle of precession. In order to calculate the cycle of precession, then you have to have observed the cycle of precession. We only recently really got an understanding of it, right? And that was through constant observation. And we have not nearly passed through the whole cycle, right? But there is a cycle. 2647 BC, 1248 Annus Mundi, 4752 before Armageddon, 408 before the flood. 2592 Anunnaki chronology, 1662 Phoenix chronology, 1392 orbital chronology, 792 in the descent of the Watchers, 456 in the Vedic calendar, and 168 Anno Pyramid. After 60 years north of the ecliptic on its highly elliptical orbit, Nibiru passes back through the inner system and completes its 792-year orbit. This is the 82nd year of the reign of the Nephilim king Emen-Luana. Nibiru's appearance in inner system is calendarically significant. This is 2448 plus 2448 months, 408 years before the flood. The 2592 years of the Anunnaki chronology is 864 times 3. It has now been exactly 792 years since the Watchers descended in 3439 BC. Noah is 192 years old. His future wife, Nama, is 274. I do not understand how this is significant enough to continue repeating it. It doesn't matter. These numbers are made up. 2635 BC, 1260 Annus Mundi, 4740 before Armageddon, 396 before the flood, 2604 the Anunnaki chronology, 1674 Phoenix chronology, 1404 orbital chronology, 204 Anunnaki dynasty, 180 Anno pyramid. The ancient Earth Killer Comet Group passes through the inner system after 330 years below the ecliptic on its 396-year orbit. This is the 204th year of the Anunnaki dynasty, or 2,448 months. Him and Luana has been ruling for 94 years. 2609 BC, 1286 Annus Mundi, 4,714 before Armageddon, 370 before the flood, 2630 Anunnaki chronology, 1700 Phoenix chronology, 1430 orbital chronology, 504 Mayan calendar, 230 Anunnaki dynasty, 206 Anu pyramid. The third king of the Nephilim dynasty of the Anunnaki is Emin-Galana, another priest of heaven of the metalworking city of Bad Tabira. Under his reign, the people began altering the natural order of nature. In this year, someone tunneled through the upper masonry of the Great Pyramid from the descendant passage into the ascendant passage system to survey stress fractures and damage caused by earthquakes. What is the source of that? What is the source material that this happened? It's not in the footnotes. It has to have come from somewhere. Right? How do you know that in this year that somebody tunneled through the upper masonry of the Great Pyramid from the descendant passage into the ascendant passage? This tunnel is present today. Just because the tunnel is present today does not mean that it happened in this year. Right? There are tunnels, right? People did try to break in. These things did happen. I'm not intimately familiar with the tunnel, with the pyramid in that way, right? I know that these passages exist. I know that they have significance in mathematics. Mathematics are real. Sacred geometry is a thing. There is a way that it has to play out in order to make things work in the way that it is designed to. And so I don't discount that these things are real and existent, and then there may be some correlation. But if there is correlation, then it has to be the same correlation, right? It has to be this unit means this date on this particular calendar system, and this other measurement means this date on that same particular calendar system. It can't change calendar systems. If it does, then it is irrelevant. It doesn't matter. It is just you looking for correlation. Correlation and causation are not the same. I would very much like to see a record from 2609 BC talking about this survey. Show me that paperwork. Interestingly, this is 4,714 years to the year 6,000 Annus Mundi. And in the Annus Mundi year of 4,714, 820 AD, the Arab Caliph of Baghdad, Al-Mamun, tunneled into the Great Pyramid and discovered the Ascendant Passages system. I think we actually have records of that one happening. This is 504 of the Mayan calendar, or 6,048 months, 864 times 7. That has no bearing upon things on the other side of the planet that does not use that system. As 230th year of Anunnaki dynasty, it was 2,760 months, 552 times 5. This was the 300th year, 108,000 days, since the Anunnaki matriarch emerged to rule in 2909 BC. Noah is 230 years old, and Emin-Galana will reign for 28,800 shars, evenings and mornings, or 880 years. Reign will end in 2529 BC. 2569 BC, 1326 Annus Mundi, 4,674 years before Armageddon, 330 before the flood, 2,670 in the Anunnaki chronology, 1,740 in the Phoenix chronology, 1,470 orbital chronology, 534 in the Vedic calendar, 270 in the Anunnaki dynasty, 246 Anno Pyramid. At the exact midpoint of the 80-year reign of the Nephilim king Imengalana, the ancient Earth-killer comet group passes through the inner system, completing its 396-year orbit. The group spends 330 years below the ecliptic and 66 years above it. 2529 BC, 1366 Annus Mundi, 4,634 years before Armageddon, 290 before the flood. 2,710 in the Anunnaki chronology, 1,780 in the Phoenix chronology. 1510 orbital chronology, 910 descent of the Watchers, 286 Anno Pyramid. The fourth king of the Nephilim dynasty, called Dumuzi, begins to reign from the metalworker city of Bad Tibira. It's interesting that none of these places are in Ireland. The ancient scribal and modern scholarly confusion between Dumuzi and Enoch is due to a chronological parallel involving Enoch's birth year of 622 Annus Mundi and the year he was made emperor over 130 kings and princes in 3151 BC. The early Sumerian chroniclers were aware that Enoch ascended into heaven and was born on the 622nd Enoch year of the pre-flood calendar. However, because Dumuzi's reign began exactly 622 years after Enoch became emperor in 3151 BC, over time the accounts of Enoch and Dumuzi were merged, making Dumuzi ascend into heaven as well, or it's exactly the opposite. Pretty much all of the legends pre-exist any understanding of Genesis that we have. This year is 600, and so it is more likely that Dumuzi was morphed into Enoch for the purposes of Jasher and Genesis than it was that Enoch was merged into Dumuzi. This year is 666 years after Seth learns about the coming of the flood in 3195 BC. Noah is 310 years old, this being the 300th year of the Nephilim Bad Tibira dynasty. 2515 BC, 1380 Annus Mundi, 4620 before Armageddon, 276 before the flood. 2,724 Anunnaki chronology, 1,794 Phoenix chronology. 1,524 orbital chronology, 324 Anunnaki dynasty, 300 Anno Pyramid. Planet Phoenix passes through the inner system, completing its 138-year orbit, and begins its journey back towards and into the distant Kuiper Belt. Didn't that happen like a couple ago? There's so many of them. This is 324 of the Anunnaki dynasty, or 108 times 3, and 300 years. Since the completion of the Great Pyramid in 2815 BC. So this is 108 times 3 and 300 years? That's not complicated at all. 2473 BC, 1422 Annus Mundi, 4578 before Armageddon, 234 before the flood, 2,766 Anunnaki chronology, 1,836 Phoenix chronology, 1,566 orbital chronology, 900 Olmec calendar, 630 Vedic calendar, 366 Anunnaki dynasty, 342 Anno Pyramid. The priest Jared died at 962, the father of Enoch, who was given a vision of the chronology of the world until after the appearance of God to gather his redeemed. A date revealed to him as being 5,500 years after his 40th year, which was the year 500 Annus Mundi, signifying the year 2106 AD. His death was 432 years, 108 times 4, after the foundation was laid to the Great Pyramid in 2905 BC. Noah was 366 years old. This was the 56th year of the reign of the Nephilim king Dumuzi. 2446 BC, 1449 Annus Mundi, 4551 before Armageddon, 207 before the Flood, 2793 Anunnaki Chronology, 1863 Phoenix Chronology, 1593 Orbital Chronology, 369 Anno Pyramid. A 5-planet alignment of Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn was seen from Earth and recorded by the Chinese as occurring in this year. They're already making astronomical observations. How interesting. The Emperor Qin reigning. This is exactly 207 years before the Great Flood, 207 being 2484 months, 414 times 6, or half a cursed Earth period of 414 years. This places the alignment of planets within the Phoenix chronology for 414 years as 3 138-year Phoenix orbits. The Great Flood in 2939 BC will be the 2070th year of the Phoenix chronology, or 207 times 10. Whether a 5-planet alignment occurred or not, this is further evidence that the ancient Chinese had access to accurate pre-flood timelines. Noah was 393 years old. This was the 83rd year of the reign of Dumuzi. And so we do know that the Chinese kept extraordinarily accurate astronomical observations. That's why I pointed that out. We have been able to draw correlations between the astronomical observations made in China from the ones made in Sumer and the ones made in Mesoamerica. We have discovered that it was accurate, that there was indeed significant events recorded accurately by multiple peoples in multiple lands separated by time and distance. These are things that are real. We do know that it is a thing. The Chinese did indeed observe the skies and make records of them on a diligent basis, spanning thousands of years. And so whether a 5-planet alignment occurred is speculation, right? But it is a fairly accurate speculation. There's no reason to cast aspersion upon those records, right? There's no reason to believe that the Chinese did not keep absolutely accurate records. We can go back and verify many of them. Many of them have been accurately done, right? Now, whether or not we can go back to 2446 BC in Stellarium, probably can, and see this alignment, probably there. Or not, we do know that they kept accurate records, right? This is throwing shade. Whether a 5-planet alignment occurred or not is throwing shade. Why would you doubt that? There is no reason to believe a lot of this information, but there is no reason to doubt that particular thing. That is independently corroborated. Oh, wait, we can't trust science, right? And in part, that is true. Science does keep some things hidden from us. That is real. Footnote 1. The Great Pyramid. Its divine message 323 and 326. A. Tables. I'm not going to try and read the Roman numerals. I'm not good at that. All right, so we'll do one more section right before we wrap up. 2429 BC, 1466 Annus Mundi, 4534 before Armageddon, 190 before the Flood, 2810 Anunnaki Chronology, 1880 Phoenix Chronology, 1610 Orbital Chronology, 1242 Jewish Calendar, 684 Mayan Calendar, and 386 Anno Pyramid. This is the 400th year of the Bad Tabira dynasty of metalworkers, and its last, ending with the reign of Dumuzi. The 5th Nephilim king is Isipazayana, who would reign for 28,800 shars, evenings and mornings, or 80 years. This begins the Archaix dynasty, a city of giants. You didn't get that from Jasher. This is 1,296 years, 108 times 12, after the start of the Sethite dynasty in 3725 BC. The entire length of the Anunnaki chronology is based off of periods of 60 and 600 years, and we see this as true with Anunnaki history as well. 480 years before the Larak dynasty was founded in 2909 BC, when the Anunnaki matriarch founded her own dynasty over the Cainites in 2909 BC. 480 years is 60 times 8. The Jewish calendar has this as 1242, or 3 cursed earth periods of 414 years each. The Genesis record in chapter 6 related that, and there were giants in the earth in those days, the offspring of the Anunnaki, angels, and human females. These were called the Nephilim, meaning the fallen ones. This new government is reflected by fact that this was 476 years after the foundation of the Great Pyramid built. That's not a fact. The number 476 signifying a change in government that will be shown over and over throughout this research. We keep getting that claim and we keep not getting the evidence. Right? It will be shown as we go through the research, and it never is. I mean, it's like Candace Owens. I'm going to tell you tomorrow what's going to happen today. No, right? So, I'm not entirely opposed to the idea of the Anunnaki. Right? There may have been a race that was the originator of our race. Possible. Whether or not they came from space, I find that a lot less likely. Not because space isn't real, but because it is an extraordinarily long journey to go on with no real reason to do so. We don't have any evidence that they were from our solar system. We don't have any evidence that Nibiru actually exists. Right? Those records we were just talking about, those incredibly accurate records from the Chinese. I don't know that they have any records of the Phoenix coming through. Right? There is thousands of years of records, and I don't know that there is a record of that. It might be. It may have some evidence. I am not dismissing that. But it is not their lore. I mean, there is lore of dragons, and that absolutely can be taken for meteors or comets, and those things are significant. Those things could be a planet, and that is something real, right? Depending on how far out it is, how far or how big it would be observed. And so it's easy to mistake distances when you're dealing in space. If you see something and it's the size of the moon, it's easy to assume it's at the same location of the moon. But it might be thousands of miles farther out, and it is just perspective making it appear the same. I wonder if the sun might be a correlative to that. There are things out there, right? There, in my estimation, there was a race that, at least a race, that changed or was cataclysmically forced into a new understanding. Now, if that exists because of my understanding with the subsistence and a stone too much, a straw too far, that's an idea. It's a theory, right? It's not even a good theory, right? It's just one that seems to correlate, kind of. I'm not asserting it as fact. It is much less likely that this one race from one island in one isolated part of the world colonized the entirety of the planet with their understanding. That is extremely unlikely. It is extremely unlikely that anybody lived past 120 years. It is extremely unlikely that any of them lasted to 130 years or 120 years. But there's another thing, right? You may have noticed I'm burning through this one a little bit faster than we have been. We're not talking about it quite as much. Most of my arguments have already been spent. I really started this study hoping that I would find some evidence that would lead me to a greater understanding. It has not been so, and so I'm just kind of speeding through it at this point. If there is something that I need to specifically disagree with, I will. But the argument against Genesis has been made repeatedly. The argument against Jasher has been made repeatedly. And so I state it as though it is already established because I feel like it has been. I mean, I'm still doing the study of Jasher. I've got a long way to go in that. There's only 8 pages left here. We may wrap up this week. I hope so, right? I am looking forward to getting into something that may have a little bit better understanding. We will be diving into some of these source materials that he is using, right? If they are available, if I can review them, we will go through them and see if there is some reason to believe these things. But so far, right, from this document, no. From this document, I do not have enough supporting evidence to believe these theories to be probable, right? They are possible. We don't know. We're not there. It is also important to note that we are 32 pages into a 40-page document. And as of yet, we have not hit the flood, right? There's been a significant amount of time since the flood, at least in the understanding. How much chronology are we talking about past the flood if we have already come this far and we're still how far? Not 190 years before the flood, right? We've only got 8 pages out of 40 left to go. Most of this information predates any records that we can accurately have. We have hieroglyphics. We can get an understanding of what the Egyptian understandings were. It was not this. We can get an understanding of the Babylonians. It was not this. I mean, parts of it correlate, parts of it absolutely do not. The understanding of the Anarchy or the Anunnaki or the Anu or the An or however it's interpreted can be taken in a whole lot of different directions, right? They had a god named An. Well, those people could have been the people of An and they were called the Anunnaki, right? That is just one theory. There's a myriad of them. There are all kinds of possibilities that this doesn't even address. From the text, right? I am trying desperately to look at this source material as a source material, but it's not working, right? Some of the things are directly contradictory to things we know to be true. Some of them are entirely speculative, like the nobody recorded seeing it, and yet it passed. Well, that is entirely speculative based upon your preconceived notions, and that's causing problems. Right? That's the same problem I have with Genesis and the entire biblical understanding. There is no real reason to believe those things. There's not if you objectively look at them. If you take off the glasses of predestination and God is a racist and that somebody had to die for you to be forgiven from sin, the book doesn't make any sense. Not at all. It is directly contradictory quite often. It cannot be used as a source material for accurate things because it is not accurate itself. The same problem with Jasher, and I'm probably going to discover the same problem with a lot of these source materials, but we're going to go through them. If there is something else that is more relevant than these source materials, by all means, let me know. Give me something. It can be anonymous. Send me an anonymous email. The link is provided. You can contact me. And if you like, you don't have to pay to send me an email to look up something, right? If you need an answer and it's going to require my time, then yes, there is a financial remuneration that is going to be required for that, right? Or else I would be consumed entirely every single day with nothing but questions, right? I've answered most of the questions that you could possibly have in these playlists. It is a thing. But if there is a specific question that you have, I'm always available. You can reach out to me. I may even waive the fee, right? That is up to me. I get to make that decision, but there has to be a bar. The bar isn't so that new information doesn't come in. The bar is not so that I am confirmed in my beliefs and there is no disrupting me from that, because the path that I am on is a disruption from the one I began on. And so if I get disrupted from this one, I take it as God directing me in the way I need to go. It is literally that simple. If I get something and I'm like, oh, that completely destroys the foundation of my belief system, then I have to look at it. I have to consider whether or not my beliefs are wrong. That's all I'm trying to do, right? I'm going through this, trying to extract information, and there's a lot of speculation, but there's not a lot of backup, right? There's a lot of math, but math is going to math regardless. And if you are drawing correlations without a real reason to, that's a problem, right? Just because it happens to fall out that the math works out how you want it to doesn't make that it is real. You can do that with gematria, and gematria is not real. It's not. It doesn't bear out in reality. There is no reason, like as far as I am aware, there is not a single prediction made from gematria before it happened, right? All of the predictions of gematria are retrospective. Well, what do you know? The towers went down, and I can go back and I can add up this particular passage, and it means that the towers are going to come down. That doesn't make it so. It doesn't make it a prophecy. The prophecy has to state the towers are going to come down, and then they do. That's how prophecy has to work. It has to be this will happen, and it does. If that doesn't happen, it's not really prophecy. See Isaiah, or at least the understanding of Isaiah, right? According to Isaiah, the prophecy was fulfilled in his lifetime. According to Christianity, it required another couple thousand years to be fulfilled, even though there's no real reason to believe that. And that's where I'm going to leave this one. If you like what I'm doing over here, let me know down below. Give me a like, a share, a follow. Throw me a comment whether you agree or disagree with anything that is stated. Put it in the box down below, and if it remains respectful, it gets to remain up. If you really like it, hit me with the super thanks. Consider joining for a membership, picking up a copy of any of my books, or reaching out to me through the links provided down below. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete, just the way that you are. And this has been pittstake. Peace.